Well, we have something sort of quick to finish up with PEC. And Barbara's coming to the table to help us out. We had a few things we had decided on for the Ed Summit, and I guess we just wanted to fill everybody in, get a little feedback. We should be able to do this in 10 minutes, so go ahead.
We can do this in 10 minutes. Name that tune. Can you bring up the Education Summit agenda? So the Public Engagement Committee has been working on crafting the agenda for this year's Education Summit. And we felt that it would be really appropriate, given the conversation around the Portrait of a Graduate and our strategic planning, which is underway, to craft a community summit that focuses on mapping your students' unique journey, explore the many choices in Fairfax County Public Schools. Because a lot of the conversation of the committee centered around the fact that we have so much to offer, and oftentimes we hear that parents just weren't aware of things like career academies or other programs that they could take advantage of. So we really wanted to focus this summit on a very hands-on, very practical way. We would love for our opening speaker to be our superintendent, Dr. Karen Garza. But we thought the keynote panel would be a group of FCPS alumni who could share their experiences and their journeys as they went through FCPS and their decisions, what bearing they had on shaping their career path, and that also we want people to get the idea, leave feeling that everything and anything is possible because we have so many resources and offerings within FCPS. So I won't go through the bulleted items, but here were some ideas that we brainstormed. A lot of breakout sessions, probably a lot of exhibits for people to visit, so that's what we came up with. I don't know whether you had anything to add.
I don't. Anybody on PEC want to add anything? No? Okay. Questions, comments? Mrs. Strauss? Sorry, go ahead, Mrs. Schultz.
Sorry, I was hiding behind Ms. Strauss. The one component to add to Ms. Hunter's description was the fact that sometimes we've focused on Portrait of a Graduate, which doesn't necessarily seem to appeal to younger students, even though it should. And so the idea is that regardless of whether you're a parent of a kindergartner or the parent of a third-time student, your third student going through FCPS, that each of your children are unique. And so you might have a fine arts student, you might have a STEM student, you might have a CTE student, and that your next student might be substantially different, and therefore you may not have paid attention, along the way to an alternate path that one of your different students, so that it would appeal to more mature parents, new parents, that it really offers a breadth of meeting you where you are with your child in the system, and that each of your children, may have unique needs. So it was to expand the audience of potential attendees.
I like the fact that this is going to build off of a Portrait of a Graduate. One of the things that I think is important, and whoever we choose to have on the panel and how we do the breakouts, is that very few kids in high school know what they are going to be. And so you don't want to focus on, here is the NBA basketball player, and if you make, freshman basketball, this is what you're going to be. But I would hope it would rather be people who basically were successful in life and whatever it was that they chose. And what were the diverse experiences that they had in Fairfax County? Because there are so many. High school should be a time that obviously you try to figure out what it is that you like to do, but also the opportunity to try out things, because you never know. There may be a CTE course that is really cool and interesting. You may never decide to go down that career path, but it gave you an opportunity. Same thing for the arts, for clubs and other activities, so that it's not it's not emphasizing being the star person in some particular field, but how all of these things can help you become a well-rounded person who's got a lot of interesting experiences. Because sometimes we highlight the star, and I don't think that is as meaningful.
Could we respond to that a little bit as to like how we're going to make up this panel? You had some ideas of people that we've already used in the past, and I was just going to suggest if anyone has an idea of someone who would be good for this panel, let us know. But Barbara, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
We did this as a breakout session in 2011. I'm not sure whether any of you remember that, but we had a panel of alums, and on it was a hairstylist, I believe an engineer, I think someone from law enforcement, someone who was for example, a lawyer. So we kind of presented the gamut of possibilities from A to Z, and it was an amazing session. They had wonderful experiences to share, and I think it was really well received. So something like that, we'll put together a panel. But definitely, if anybody has any ideas or suggestions for alums.
Ms. Reed?
Thank you. I think this sounds terrific. A couple quick questions. Is it your intention that the objective be to educate parents? I mean, would students, would you assume that students would come? Are you targeting students? Because to me that would kind of change how you might set up the day, right?
Yeah, in terms of timing.
And and how you present information.
Yeah, I think definitely it's our target audience is students as well as parents. Yeah, and we'd have to think about how to target that.
Okay, and following up on what Janie said, I really like the idea of, emphasizing high school as the opportunity in particular, well, all grade school to try things out, and also the emphasis on the whole child, that, you don't have to be an academic superstar to be a success. And I think that's a very important message right from the start. I also was thinking about things like clubs and after-school activities. I mean, I don't know if anyone could pass a quiz on what some of the clubs are, like DECA, So that might be something, too, just to provide some information on the depth and breadth of kind of the non-academic activities that people can take advantage of and benefit from, as well as things like the leadership class. Is one that I myself would like to learn more about. And I don't know to what extent you want to keep it focused on FCPS. Is that your intention versus talking about, community resources, other, volunteer opportunities and things like this? I don't know. It's a question I have, I guess, as to if you want to keep it focused or you want to maybe have a table and have handouts or something for other suggestions for people. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great idea. In the past, we've had our exhibitors limited to just FCPS, but now that we're focused on FCPS and all the breakout sessions, maybe this would be a great opportunity to have our community organizations like Volunteer Fairfax, other folks be there exhibiting at tables to share their information.
Yeah,
it's a good idea.
Now that you mention them, especially because the service requirement that kids have, I always feel like kids are racing around at the last minute to try to find something to do, and so that's just probably one area in particular that could probably be mined, right? So, but I think this sounds terrific. Thank you.
Okay, Ryan?
Yes, I'm fine with everything. One question that I have, though, is I know that Deloitte was looking to fund other things in the county. What are we looking to do in terms of funding for this?
Well, now that we've settled on a topic that you've all come to some consensus around the topic, we'll just have to go out and shop around to see who might be interested in supporting this. Clearly, we won't have the cost of a big keynote speaker, but we will have food and, custodian, that kind of those kind of costs. So if anybody has any ideas, I'd be happy to entertain them too.
Okay, Megan?
I'm trying to think of how best to communicate this. We have some amazing summits around the county, and our families have demonstrated how great they are because they come out in very large numbers. Because they speak to our different parent groups and where their passions or their interests or the connections to their families are, they go. And I've watched this education summit so well intended, but not well attended. And I'm just wondering at this point, when I think about staff time and everything here, what is our impetus to keep doing this? I think we have these summits, including the community conversation now on teen stress, so it's responsive. We find out what's going on in our community, and we hold a conversation or an event like this. And then some of the other ones have just become extremely popular, and maybe as we find other special issues that we start to do it. But I just feel like we're just doing this because it was a novel idea, and yet it hasn't taken off. And I think with everything this system juggles, it would be my preference that we don't do one. And we just go ahead and let staff focus on the ones that are already so well attended, and then being able to do things like the one Dr. Dockery is going to be putting together in a few weeks. That's responsive when an issue arises in our community, and we become leaders on the subject. But this just feels forced.
Okay, Dr. Garza, did you want to respond?
I kind of wondered about the timing because, we may be in a position to kind of unveil the strategic plan and really launch our Portrait of a Graduate. And I'm not sure if we'll be complete at that point, but I think we'll be pretty close, potentially. And so I think that would warrant potentially an opportunity to tell our community about the direction of the school system. And then also in light of what the students said earlier tonight about really reaching out to parents, is there a place for that within this? I think that was a prevailing theme from our students just tonight about how do we, educate our parents about health and wellness, mental health, wellness, that kind of thing. Just a question.
Oh, okay. I have a few other people. Mr. Stork?
The genesis for the Education Summit, at least I think Kathy and I particularly were enthusiastic, initial developers of this concept is we were trying to enlarge the awareness and consciousness within the county of education issues. So the intent was, it wasn't to be just about FCPS. It really was to be about education and learning and how do we grow, how do we enlarge the folks who understand that that's part of their lives, even though they may have graduated from whatever. And the intent is that we find a way to bring in folks to that. And there's no doubt that the formula isn't there yet. I don't think I'm not uncomfortable saying that, but I also believe that there's a great need for us to find a formula that brings people together on education issues, not just on special needs kids, or not just on another, on career technical education, or things that are more, segmented or more focused. I think this board's job is to be a leader on learning and education in Fairfax County, even though we have obviously some wonderful universities and community colleges, et cetera. So the commitment that I have to this being truly a learning experience and a way of bringing people together on broader issues in education is still there. Maybe the formulation isn't quite right, but I'm not willing to give it up until we've tried other things. But I also know that I don't think a couple hundred people to go to a session that frankly doesn't cost that much is anything wrong with that, regardless. So the topic I'm not as sure about because it's not as broad. And again, that was the dilemma. When I was chair of the PEC, we had the same issues: is how do you kind of balance the people that you want to attract to it, which are going to be the parents and students and staff. They're truly the folks who are very deeply committed to education. And how do we bring in people who maybe aren't as routinely as committed to education and understanding, and getting them to come in? Does it take a different kind of PR program, or does it take, some kind of a a modular kind of a system. Maybe it isn't a formal, maybe it's a MOOC of sorts. Maybe a huge online community that we do. So again, I think my commitment is deeply into doing something that enlarges people's conversations about education, and having a speaker or a book or something that's truly of a key part of the conversation, key part of the interest level now. And maybe that's a way of kind of attracting and getting folks to get involved. But I don't really have much more to add, except that I know that we've got to find this point. We are the education leaders in Fairfax County, and we need to find ways to get more people involved. And if we do that, I think we'll find the funding for Fairfax County schools will always be better as a result.
Okay. Ms. Darnett Koufax?
I appreciate your comments, Dan, because I think what we need to do is look at it as a whole continuum. I think for a while, you all had the Ken K, and I forget your first one. I don't think I attended that one. Well, that was the one when I was here already. But anyway, I do think a couple things in responding to Ms. McLaughlin's comment. I do think, as Mr. Stork, since this was his founding, he was one of the founders with Kathy, and then I felt very privileged to be able to take that over. I love the fact that it's a proactive rather than a reactive thing. I do think it's very broad-based, and I think the first year when the newer board members came on, we had the bigger scope. We had Ron Ferguson. We talked about the achievement gap. We talked about different things. We had found him at an NSBA conference, and that was pretty well attended. And then we did hear some of the feedback, and we reformatted last year for some of the feedback, and last year we had the highest attendance we ever had. I can't remember the numbers, Barbara.
It was 700 last
700. So that is not a small amount of people. That is something, yeah, that is something that, yes, people who physically came. Because the first year, I think we had like 500 registrations. With Ron Ferguson, we had 500 registrations, but about 300 came. Last year, we actually had 700 people cross that threshold in the door. So we felt like we had a formula that worked, and I think that's where some of this conversation came for this. Let's kind of keep it for that parent group kind of still learning, and then I think we need to go back out and say, then let's look at something, because you're right. This really hasn't been very cookie cutter. We've taken different approaches. Some work, some don't. Some work better than others. So I love the idea of kind of making that. And again, we felt in a tight budget year, and we felt, with Karen, we introduced her, we introduced Dr. Garza, and now with a full year and all of these things. And Dr. Garza, I think we probably should look at the timing of it. If you want to say that Portrait of a Graduate is ready to launch, then I think maybe I know that.
No, we could definitely move it back to October if that's.
I'd need to get with our consultants to make sure that we'd be complete by then, but we do need some opportunity to convey to the community where we are with that.
Well, that seems like the
and I know
right
it shouldn't be maybe the exclusive focus, but I do think there's a lot of interest in. There would be a lot of interest, I think.
And formulaically, that would fit perfect with this topic that we've already chosen. So perhaps that's what we need to do, is re-look back at that, at the timing even. But if anything else, it gives us more timing rather than less. It's not moving it up, it's moving it back.
Okay, Ms. Evans?
Well, thank you. I'm glad that Tammy brought that up, and followed up about the timing, because if it's really not ripe for us to talk about these major things, because I do think that that's the advantage of having everybody come out. My thinking is that in August we have all of our top school leaders come out and hear from the superintendent about what's coming up, and so this is an opportunity for parents and students to hear about major changes or major initiatives that we have. But if it is premature to do it in September, then we might want to think about the timing, and I guess we need to think about that sooner rather than later, because I know you've set aside. It's always hard to find the location, but I mean, should we be thinking about October or even November, or is I would hate to cut it too close and not have, the robust conversation that I guess we're anticipating that this subject would have.
Dan, what do you think? Do you think we'll be in a position by the end of September? I think so. I mean, we may be just perfect. I just want to confirm that before.
Okay. So I guess I'm thinking that this is really a great opportunity, and if we record it and have it available on the website for everybody in the school system to see, then we can have more than the 700. I thought the last Education Summit was quite successful. We had breakout sessions where the classrooms were jammed with people. If we're concerned about staff time, I guess we might think in the future about maybe having fewer sessions. That's one possibility. I think last year we did have a lot of sessions, and it did take a lot of staff time. But I like the direction we're going in, and I think having it as an annual conversation with the community, it has gotten bigger and bigger every year. And I think this is an opportunity for the superintendent and for us to have something that's countywide. So I support it. I guess I am hearing what Ms. McLaughlin and Mrs. Schultz are saying about staff time, and we might want to think about that in the future.
Okay, so if I could I have go-backs, but so I guess, Dr. Garza, if you could get back to PEC, and you can email me if you are, all of us, when you feel certain that maybe an October date would work instead, then we could change it to an October date. I mean, do you feel now like an October date would be safe?
Even the September date may be fine. I just want to confirm that. But if we find out that even just moving it by a week or so would put us in a better position, we will let you know about that.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Ms. Strauss?
Yeah, I really think focusing on Portrait of a Graduate, I think all of this fits into it, and it would be, what is it, why? Because I think that's the question of the why. That really needs a lot of discussion so that people understand why we're going down this road in the world of research, and then how do we make sure that we are going to achieve the Portrait of a Graduate. But I think that would be interesting enough, and I think research-based, to be able to quote why all of our efforts are going in this direction. Because even though we've had a lot of focus groups and people talking about this, I think then to give an opportunity for broader discussion and a real explanation, and I think it'd be a great kickoff for this. And again, as we are looking for underpinnings for the community to understand whether there are budget issues or testing and accountability, all these other things, a well-done presentation of Portrait of the Graduate gives you the underpinning, the basis for everything else that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And we might want to involve Economic Development Authority and some of those guys and the Chamber, because I think they would have some very important things to say about a Portrait of the Graduate.
Well, here, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. I think, if I'm understanding correctly, the Portrait of a Graduate would come in the keynote, in Dr. Garza's keynote address.
In the keynote, and then it would provide the basis or the impetus for why we're discussing all these other things. It's what is it? Why have we come through this? In other words, why are we not going back to basics?
Well, okay, the rest of as I understand it, the rest of the day would be devoted to, here are all the opportunities available to your child.
Sure, which would fit. It's why do we have all these opportunities?
Right, so I'm kind of wondering, maybe we could talk offline about where you think the Chamber and Economic Development Authority would fit in that, because I'm not clear.
Part of their whole issue of our kids are growing up in a global community where we need these higher level skills and talents and searches and what have you in order to find their place in the world in which they're going to live.
Okay, all right, we can talk about where they might fit in the day, though, I think is my question. Okay, any other thoughts? Dan?
And Kathy and I have been talking a little bit more about this issue too, and kind of tagging on to what Jenny was saying. I think there is kind of a continuum, and I I love that word. I think that is the right word for what we're trying to do, and we're trying different things, and part of it works, part of it doesn't, and we build on that. But tying the portrait of a graduate to the next step of that process, which is, how to be successful in the next step, in a sense. And we've done a version of that a few years ago, but I would like to see us really involve the economic development folks, businesses here, not just the big corporations, but even smaller businesses, and try to find a way to connect, people with what is real in Fairfax County in terms of employment and other kinds of things that they could aspire to, and even to. I think we have plenty of opportunities, and I've been kind of talking offline to Dr. Garza about this, but work study, apprenticeship. I think we really need to add those to our offerings for kids. We have career technical education. From my perspective, we started too late, but we have that whole continuum, if you will, of a different type that we could wrap into a kind of a follow-on to this. You could have a piece of it, but there's a clear follow-on at a future year where you're tying the two of these things together. So I think we've always been more focused, not always, but most of these have been about kind of high school sort of kids and skills and things that they should be having when they get ready to go in the workforce. And I think that's, I think, in general, the right target for having these kind of discussions, but maybe we need to make them a little bit more thematic over the course of a couple of years and bring people in that way.
That makes sense. Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin?
I just want to say that I would support what Dr. Garza suggested, that if we're doing this, we roll out the portrait of a graduate and or the strategic plan. I think that's actually something that would be extremely important countywide, and I could see the value of it.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Well, we'll take this back. Thank you.
Mr. Wickup? Do we need to make any pause for recording purposes?
Couple of minutes.
Okay, so we'll start at 10 till. 2-minute break.